to redesign the aircraft with a conventional tricycle arrangement. The resulting Ar-234B, slightly larger but otherwise unchanged, had sturdy retractable landing gear. The heavy-duty nose gear retracted aft, while the main landing gear retracted forward. The main gear well occupied a space that had previously contained a fuel cell. Arado widened the fuselage to make room for the main gear and its retraction assemblies. But the new landing gear was not the panacea the Luftwaffe had hoped. Though it made the plane much more maneuverable on the ground, the track was so narrow that landings and takeoffs became somewhat tricky. Additionally, the oversized tires, built for rough, unprepared airfields, gave the pilot a soft, roller coaster-like ride. But the ability to do away with the cumbersome trolley system and quickly clear the landing areas for returning aircraft made any problems with the new system seem minor. Typical of first-generation jet engines, both the Junkers and BMW power plants were extremely thirsty. Range was always important, and in attempts to extend the Blitz's short time aloft, jettisonable 66-gallon fuel tanks were suspended from racks under the engines. The plane's 814-gallon internal fuel load was carried in two flexible rubberized tanks mounted in the fuselage. Maximum range varied between 415 miles at sea level and nearly 1,000 miles at 30,000 feet. The low thrust of the Junkers and BMW turbojets led to excessively long takeoff runs. Accordingly, the plane was often equipped with rocket-assisted takeoff, or RATO units. Each provided an extra 1,100 pounds of thrust and burned out only seconds after leaving the ground. The only known surviving Ar-234 at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington is equipped with the RATO units. Essentially a modular power egg with a rocket engine inside, it was used to get a variety of Luftwaffe aircraft off the ground. Complex but reliable, the small rocket's largest component was a ball-shaped propellant tank. In it, two propellants, T-Stoff and C-Stoff, ignited upon contact. Stacked RATO units were kept empty and wheeled to a refueling depot on a special dolly. C-Stoff, a water alcohol hydrazine catalyst, was relatively docile and didn't require special handling. T-Stoff, on the other hand, primarily hydrogen peroxide and a stabilizer, was extremely toxic. It was highly acidic and lethal to the touch, and ground crews working with it were forced to wear protective clothing. The units were reusable and came equipped with a small nose-mounted parachute that deployed automatically. The rockets vastly improved jet performance, but once ignited, there was no turning back. They could, however, be jettisoned in an emergency. In normal operation following rocket burnout, the units were jettisoned by the pilot. But they had to release in unison because a hung rocket could send an imbalanced plane out of control. The RATO eggs were then recovered and prepared for reuse in a matter of hours. Takeoff was swift and easy, with a nose-high angle of attack and an extraordinary rate of ascent. Without the aid of the RATO units, the aircraft's angle of attack and rate of ascent were drastically reduced. The units could be jettisoned at almost any altitude. On occasion, as this intrepid photographer realized, The RATO parachute system failed, damaging the rocket beyond repair. But when all went well, the rockets could be put to use again. Following recovery, the RATO units were flushed of propellants by forcing water through with compressed air. Then they were inspected and returned to flight-worthy status and placed in storage. The Ar-234 bomber, with 3 bombs and 2 RATO units attached, taxis out to the runway. 1 bomb is mounted under the fuselage, and 1 hangs from each engine nacelle. On these aircraft, equipped with conventional landing gear, a recessed bomb bay replaced the landing skid. This streamlined the plane.
I was only worrying about something when I landed or took off or when I climbed. But when I had a run, nobody could lick me. There was no aircraft, no fighter aircraft who could attack me, because it was not possible to go in a position in this time. Yeah? We were too fast.
In October 1944, this Blitz was still a novelty. Pilot Horst Goetz is seen preparing for a reconnaissance mission over Allied targets, while the ground crew and casual observers cluster around the plane's transparent nose. The Ar-234 was only vulnerable to attack during takeoff or landing. And this did happen. Both American and British fighters claimed Ar-234 kills. Most were surprise attacks against unsuspecting Luftwaffe flyers who only realized the danger when it was too late. The plexiglass was just over 2/10 of an inch thick and gave pilots an exceptional forward view. Early Ar-234s were almost blind to the rear, however, and were later equipped with an aft-looking periscope. A life-saving innovation, the device gave pilots a chance to avoid surprise attacks from the rear, an invariably fatal experience. The periscope was Erich Sommer's idea.
And this telescope was developed from a Panzer or tank telescope. It is heavy enough, rather for a tank than for an aircraft. But the idea was the pilot can look into the ocular here, and you saw out there above the horizon what is happening up there. Gave you a security that you had a clear sky behind you.
On the ground, it was business as usual for the embattled and outnumbered Luftwaffe crews. Though there appeared little they could do to stem the tide of war, the airmen tried to keep up a facade of optimism. Here, a radio for communicating with airborne comrades is the center of activity. Horst Goetz, on the left here, was one of the elite Luftwaffe pilots assigned to the Ar-234. In this candid footage, taken by his fellow pilot and good friend Erich Sommer, Horst and the others put on a carefree face in a time of insanity. Unlike Allied pilots, the men of the Luftwaffe didn't have a rotation system. They flew until death or defeat overtook them. And for all of them, that day was rapidly approaching. With the Allied noose growing tighter, Nazi troops were defending German soil for the very first time. Resistance became bloodier and more fanatical. Losses in men and machines were beyond belief. The Reich was disintegrating in a storm of its own making. Allied bombing attacks leveled cities and laid waste to industry. And the carnage for humanity reached new depths. Allied bombing missions concentrated on Germany's remaining strategic resources. Oil and fuel refineries were sought out by the massive bomber formations. But if fuel supplies were wiped out, the Reich war machine would be brought to its knees.